Back in 2003, researchers tagged a 9-foot great white shark off the Australian coastline as part of a standard marine science program. 4 months down the line, the data recorder turned up on a beach. What was stored inside it made absolutely no sense. The temperature reading had surged to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The depth had dropped to nearly 2,000 feet within just minutes. The shark had vanished, not drifted away, not gone off course, vanished. Something had consumed it. And whatever that creature was, it was larger, stronger, and far more frightening than anything scientists believed was inhabiting those waters. Let us go back to where it all started. The year is 2003. A group of marine scientists working off the southern coast of Australia attach a tracking tag to a healthy 9-foot female great white shark as part of an ongoing long-term study. Now, 9 feet is nothing to dismiss. A great white of that size carries somewhere around 500 pounds of mass. This is no young animal. This is a fully developed, completely capable apex predator, the kind of creature that has occupied the very peak of the ocean food chain for approximately 11 million years. The tag fitted to this shark was what scientists refer to as a data logger. It is a device that captures depth readings, water temperature, light levels, and movement data. It does not broadcast live signals in real time. Instead, it stores all collected information, and once it eventually detaches and rises to the surface, it beams that saved data up to a satellite. The research team then retrieves the recorder, pulls the data, and reconstructs a picture of where the shark traveled and what it encountered along the way. 4 months after being attached, the tag washed up on shore. The team downloaded the data fully expecting the ordinary, routine dive patterns, minor temperature shifts, movement across familiar territory. What they received instead was something that brought the entire project to a complete standstill. The data showed the tag plummeting downward rapidly, not in the slow, gradual way a shark descends while hunting or exploring, but rapidly. Nearly 2,000 feet in a matter of minutes. Then came the temperature reading, and this is the point where things become genuinely unsettling. The recorded temperature shot up to 95 degrees Fahrenheit and held there, not for a brief moment. It was sustained. For any marine researcher, that particular combination of readings points to one very specific conclusion. The tag was no longer floating freely in the ocean. It was inside something warm, something living, something that had plunged to extreme depths with the tag, and the shark it had been fixed to swallowed inside its gut. The lead researcher on the project, a scientist named Rachel Donahue, later spoke about the moment she reviewed that data as one of the most deeply unsettling experiences across her entire scientific career. Not because the numbers were impossible to explain, but because of exactly what they pointed toward. Now here's something I need you to fully grasp before we go any further, because most people understand on a surface level that great white sharks are dangerous without ever truly feeling the biological weight of that reality. Great white sharks are not simply oversized fish armed with sharp teeth. They are the result of millions upon millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning. They can reach lengths of 20 feet and tip the scales at over 5,000 pounds. They are capable of detecting a single drop of blood diluted across 100 liters of water. They can pick up the electromagnetic fields generated by a living, beating heart buried beneath solid sand. In short bursts, they can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. Their teeth are serrated, constantly self-replacing, and set in multiple staggered rows. When one wears down or breaks, the next one simply rotates forward to take its place. In the most literal possible sense, the great white shark is a killing machine that the ocean spent millions of years engineering to near perfection. And here's the thing about apex predators that people tend to overlook. It is not purely about physical size or weaponry. It is about the ecological role they fill. Apex predators have no natural predators of their own. That is precisely what the term means. They occupy the top position in the chain, and nothing pursues them. For a long time, scientists simply accepted this as an unquestioned truth when it came to great white sharks in the open ocean. Sure, orcas had been spotted harassing great whites in certain specific locations. Documented conflicts between large sharks had been recorded before. Yes, but outright predation, so a creature that actively hunted, killed, and consumed a great white shark, that simply was not part of anyone's model, which is precisely what makes what the data recorder revealed so significant and so genuinely unsettling. The data that refused to make sense. Let me walk you through exactly what those numbers meant, because I think once you understand the physics of what was actually captured on that tag, the whole thing becomes considerably harder to wrap your head around. And I say that as someone who has spent years digging through marine biology research and considered himself reasonably hard to shake. The first number was depth. The tag dropped to nearly 2,000 feet. Now, I need you to understand why that single reading was already alarming before researchers had even looked at anything else. Great white sharks are not deep water creatures by nature. This is a species that evolved to hunt in coastal shallows, in open ocean surface waters, in the productive upper layers of the water column where light penetrates and prey is plentiful. They operate primarily within the top 1,000 feet. That is their world. That is where they feed, where they breed, where they spend the vast majority of their existence. A sudden plunge to 2,000 feet is not typical great white behavior. It is not a foraging dive. It is not an exploratory movement. When a data tag records that kind of rapid, extreme depth change within a matter of minutes, there are very few explanations left available to you. The shark was not descending by choice. Something was pulling it down, carrying it downward. And whatever was doing the carrying was a strong enough swimmer to reach 2,000 feet, quickly, efficiently, and apparently without much effort at all. That alone should have been enough to leave the research team deeply unsettled. But then they looked at the second number. Temperature. This is the reading that confirmed everything. The one that transformed a strange anomaly into an unavoidable conclusion. At 2,000 feet of depth off the coast of Australia, the ocean is cold. Not refreshingly cool, genuinely profoundly cold. Water temperatures at that depth in that region sit somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Dark, pressurized, frigid water. If the tag had simply fallen away from the shark and sunk, or if the shark had died and the tag had drifted down alongside the carcass, that is exactly the temperature you would expect to see on the record. 40 degrees, maybe 45. Cold water growing slightly colder as depth increased. Instead, the temperature reading surged to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And it did not surge briefly. It did not spike for a moment and then fall back down the way you might expect from some kind of equipment fault or environmental irregularity. It held, sustained, stable, 95 degrees at 2,000 feet beneath the surface of the Southern Ocean. There is only one explanation for that reading. Only one scenario in which a data tag records a sustained temperature of 95 degrees while sitting 2,000 feet deep in frigid ocean water. The tag was no longer in the ocean. It was inside something with a warm interior, something biological, something alive that had swallowed the shark, tag and all, and then descended to 2,000 feet with its meal still inside it. I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I had to when I first grasped what those two numbers meant together. Something in the waters off Australia swallowed a 500-pound great white shark whole, dove to 2,000 feet, and then surfaced and carried on with its life. And not a single person on the surface of that ocean witnessed any of it. No dorsal fin, no surface disturbance, no photograph, no witness, nothing. It was simply there, moving through the water, doing something we did not believe anything in that ocean was capable of doing. And the only reason we know it happened at all is because a small plastic data recorder washed up on a beach 4 months later, carrying the only proof that any of it was real. The question that consumed the research team for the following decade was the obvious one. The very one that I suspect is consuming you right now. What on earth was it? The suspects. When the data was finally examined and the predation hypothesis was confirmed, scientists set about working through every possible candidate. And I want to walk you through this process because it is genuinely fascinating to watch how each theory fell apart one by one. The first suspect was the orca, the killer whale. We know that orcas are capable of killing great white sharks. This is well documented. There is actual footage of it. Orcas in certain regions, particularly off South Africa's coast and in parts of the Pacific, have developed a hunting method where they turn great whites upside down, triggering a state of tonic immobility, and then eat the shark's liver. It is efficient, brutal, and impressive, even by ocean standards. But the orca theory unraveled almost immediately once researchers examined the depth data. Orcas are not deep divers. They stay near the surface. The deepest orca dive ever recorded is just under 1,000 feet. And that in itself is remarkable. An orca does not casually drop down to 2,000 feet with a shark in its belly. The physiology simply does not support that. Strike one. The second suspect was the sperm whale. Now here is a creature that genuinely descends to extreme depths. Sperm whales regularly dive down to 7,000 feet chasing giant squid. They are the deep diving champions of the ocean mammal world, and they are enormous. A large male sperm whale can reach 60 feet in length and tip the scales at over 100,000 pounds. Could a sperm whale have swallowed a great white shark? Physically, yes. A sperm whale's throat is wide enough to take a shark down whole, but the temperature data did not line up. Sperm whales are mammals. They are warm-blooded. Their internal body temperature runs somewhere around 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. The recorded temperature of 95 degrees is somewhat lower than what you would expect from inside a sperm whale's stomach. Not impossibly lower, but inconsistent enough to give researchers pause. And from a behavioral standpoint, sperm whales are not known to hunt sharks. Their diet consists almost entirely of cephalopods, squid, not sharks. Strike two. Researchers then turn their attention to the possibility of a large oceanic white-tip shark or a tiger shark. Both species are recognized as aggressive and opportunistic hunters. Tiger sharks especially will eat just about anything, but neither species grows large enough to consume a 9-foot great white. The largest confirmed tiger shark on record measures around 14 feet. To swallow a 9-foot great white whole, you would need something considerably bigger than your prey. The numbers simply did not add up. Strike three. There was even a brief and somewhat awkward period when a fringe theory began circulating, suggesting that a massive squid might have been behind it all. A colossal squid, theoretically large enough to drag a shark down into the depths. I will be honest with you, that theory did not survive for long. The temperature reading alone ruled out any cold-blooded invertebrate. Strike four. One by one, every conventional candidate was crossed off the list. And as the pool of suspects narrowed, researchers found themselves staring at a possibility that was simultaneously obvious and almost too strange to take seriously. The true culprit revealed. What if the predator was another great white shark? Not just any great white shark. Not a slightly larger individual that got lucky during a territorial clash, but a great white shark of a size that most marine biologists had never genuinely entertained. A shark so immense that a 9-foot, 500-pound great white was nothing more than a meal. Let me explain how researchers arrived at this conclusion, because it was not a guess. It was a process of elimination combined with some truly remarkable scientific thinking. The temperature reading of 95 degrees Fahrenheit is the crucial piece. Unlike mammals, sharks are generally ectothermic, meaning cold-blooded. Their body temperature mirrors that of the surrounding water, except that is not entirely accurate when it comes to great white sharks. Great whites belong to a family known as the Lamnidae, the mackerel sharks, and they possess an extraordinary adaptation called regional endothermy. They are capable of generating and holding onto body heat in specific regions, particularly around their muscles, eyes, and brain. They are able to keep their core body temperatures considerably higher than the water surrounding them. In cold, deep ocean conditions, the inside of a large great white shark's stomach could realistically hold a temperature of around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The depth of nearly 2,000 feet also lines up with great white shark behavior in ways that researchers initially overlooked entirely. Great whites are capable of diving far deeper than their typical range would suggest. They have been tracked going down to over 3,000 feet in open ocean environments. The dive recorded by the data logger, while extreme, was not beyond the physical capability of a very large great white. But here's the question that everyone kept coming back to. How big does a great white shark have to be in order to swallow a 9-foot specimen whole? Researchers who have studied the dynamics of shark predation suggest that for one great white to successfully prey on another, the predator would need to be roughly double the length of its target. To swallow a 9-foot shark, you would be looking at a great white somewhere between 15 and 20 feet in length, possibly even bigger. The kind of size that sits right at the very edge of what we believe great white sharks are capable of reaching. Now, here is where things get genuinely unsettling. There are credible historical accounts going back decades describing great white sharks that reached sizes well beyond what appears in the modern scientific record. Commercial fishermen, naval officers, and researchers from the mid-20th century reported encounters with sharks estimated at 20 feet or more. For a long time, those accounts were brushed aside as exaggeration. Big fish stories, memories stretched by time and imagination. But what if they were not exaggerated at all? What if somewhere in the ocean there are great white sharks of a size we have simply never managed to tag, study, or photograph? Animals that spend the majority of their lives in the deep, open ocean, far from coastlines, far from research vessels, far from the shallow water environments where we do nearly all of our shark observation. The research team concluded that the most likely predator of the tagged shark was a female great white of exceptional size. Female great whites grow considerably larger than males. The largest confirmed female great whites on record come close to 20 feet in length and weigh more than 4,000 pounds. But confirmation of this did not come from data analysis alone. It came from something researchers noticed when they compared the tag data to tracking records from other sharks moving through the same region. In the months following the tagged shark's disappearance, a separate tracking system picked up the movement of a large, untagged animal passing through that same area. The movement patterns, the dive profiles, the territorial range. All of it was consistent with an enormous female great white shark, a shark that had never been formally documented, a shark the ocean had simply never introduced to science before. She had been out there the whole time, moving through those waters, doing exactly what apex predators do. And one morning in 2003, she had eaten a 9-foot great white shark for breakfast and descended 2,000 feet to digest it. I genuinely have no idea how to make that sound less alarming than it already is. So I am not going to try. Here is the deeper, more disturbing truth. This is the part of the story that nobody really talks about because the headline is just too irresistible. A massive great white consuming another great white whole. That is exactly the kind of information that makes you want to cancel your trip to Australia, stare at the ocean from a very comfortable distance, and rethink every single life decision that ever put you near open water. Completely understandable. I am not judging anyone. But the headline is actually the least disturbing part of all this, because once researchers confirmed what had happened to that tagged shark back in 2003, they did what scientists always do when they stumble across something unexpected. They went back through the historical record and began searching for patterns they had previously overlooked. And what they found was deeply unsettling in a way that goes far beyond one dramatic predation event off the coast of Australia. Great white shark predating on another great white shark is no freak event. It is not some 1 in a million collision between two creatures caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a behavior with a documented history, and a lengthy one at that. Fishing and research records from the middle of the 20th century include numerous accounts of large great whites that were hauled up or spotted carrying enormous bite wounds. Wounds with a specific arc, spacing, and serration pattern that could only have been made by the jaws of another great white. For decades, those records were cataloged under territorial aggression. Sharks scrapping over food. Nobody seriously considered the possibility that what they were actually recording was predation. Then, in 1997, a research vessel operating near the Farallon Islands off San Francisco witnessed a large great white get attacked and physically pushed away from a whale carcass by a noticeably larger great white. Not competing, not posturing, but attacking with clear intent and driving the smaller animal away in obvious distress. In 2009, a formal study published across several marine biology journals laid out evidence of intraspecies predation among great whites at multiple sites throughout the Pacific. In 2022, Researchers working off the coast of South Africa discovered a group of great whites, all bearing identical parallel bite wounds. Same depth, same spacing, same source. Taken individually, you can explain away any single one of these incidents. Territorial dispute, competition over resources, two apex predators having an unfortunate encounter in close quarters. Scientists are professionally conditioned to resist bold conclusions drawn from isolated data points, and reasonably so. But you cannot look at the complete body of evidence. Stretch it across 70 years of documented observations spanning multiple ocean basins, layer the 2003 tag data on top of all of that, and still dismiss it as territorial aggression. The picture that takes shape is something else altogether. The very largest great white sharks do not simply compete with smaller ones. They consume them. This is apex predation occurring within an apex species itself. The food chain that everyone assumed ended at the great white shark does not end there at all. It continues upward into size ranges that marine science has barely scratched the surface of seriously investigating, which means the diagram we constructed, the one placing the great white at the very top with everything else arranged tidally beneath it, is simply not complete. And if we got that so wrong about the most studied, most filmed, most recognized predator in the entire ocean, the question that naturally follows is one that ought to keep every marine biologist up at night. What else have we gotten wrong? Why do we almost never witness this behavior? There is a reason this behavior stayed concealed for so long. Several reasons, in fact, and understanding them reveals something significant about the boundaries of marine science and just how much of the ocean we are genuinely blind to. The first reason is geography. The open ocean is staggeringly immense. The Pacific Ocean alone spans 60 million square miles. The combined surface area of all the world's oceans is 139 million square miles. Of that, we have meaningfully explored perhaps 5% and not studied in any real detail, just passed through with instruments. The deep open ocean, the pelagic zone below 1,000 feet, is for nearly all practical purposes completely invisible to us. Whatever unfolds down there, we simply do not see it. The second reason involves tagging coverage, something most people genuinely do not appreciate. For all the shark research carried out over the past 50 years, the total number of great white sharks ever successfully tagged and tracked remains relatively small. Estimates place the global great white population somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 individuals. The number that have ever carried a functioning data tag is only a fraction of that figure. We are drawing sweeping conclusions about the behavior and ecology of an entire species based on observations drawn from a tiny sample. The third reason is size bias. When researchers tag great white sharks, they typically do so in coastal areas where sharks venture close to shore. The sharks available for tagging in these kinds of environments tend to be younger, smaller animals. The very largest great whites, females exceeding 20 feet, the ones most likely responsible for the kind of predation we have been discussing, spend the majority of their time out in the deep open ocean. They simply are not where the researchers happen to be. It is a bit like trying to understand how African elephants behave by observing only the calves that stray near the park's edge. When you put all of that together, you end up with a situation where the most ecologically significant behavior of one of the ocean's most famous species has remained completely invisible to science. Not because it was uncommon, but because we were never in the right place, with the right tools, at the right moment, looking in the right direction. The ocean is far better at holding on to its secrets than we are at pulling them apart. What changes here? The identification of a large female great white as the animal responsible for the disappearance back in 2003 is not simply a satisfying answer to a gripping mystery. It carries real, substantive consequences for how marine biologists think about ocean ecology and apex predator dynamics. The first and most immediate of those consequences concerns conservation modeling. Great white sharks are a protected species across much of the world. The conservation strategies built around them rest on population models that treat human activity, fishing, finning, and habitat degradation as the primary threats to the species. Those models do not factor in intraspecies predation as a meaningful source of mortality. If very large great whites are regularly preying on smaller great whites, then the population dynamics are considerably more complex than current models reflect. The assumptions about survival rates are off, and the projections for recovery could be fundamentally wrong. The second implication involves what scientists refer to as trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is what happens when a shift at the very top of a food chain sends ripples downward through every level below it. We already understand that the presence or absence of great white sharks has a dramatic effect on the behavior and distribution of their prey, seals, sea lions, smaller sharks, and various fish populations. If intraspecies predation is reshaping the size distribution within the great white population by selectively removing smaller individuals, the cascade effects could be substantial and entirely absent from the ecosystem models we currently rely on. The third implication is perhaps the most philosophically uncomfortable of all. For a long time, the great white shark has served as our mental reference point for ocean apex predation. When we picture the top of the marine food chain, the great white is what comes to mind. It is the benchmark, the ceiling. But if the great white shark is itself subject to predation from within its own species, then the ceiling is not where we assumed it was. The apex is not a fixed point. It is size-dependent and dynamic in ways we have not fully reckoned with. And that opens up a question I find both genuinely fascinating and genuinely unsettling. Are there other animals in the ocean, apex predators in their own right, that operate under the same dynamic? Are there species we currently classify as apex predators that are actually prey to larger, deeper, rarer members of their own kind? Animals we have never tagged, never photographed, never formally recorded. Based on everything the 2003 incident brought to light, the honest answer is that we simply do not know. And not knowing is not a comfortable position to occupy when the decisions we are making directly affect entire ecosystems. Here is what keeps coming back to me whenever I think about this story. We gave that shark a name, not the great white that was consumed, but the other one, the predator. Researchers who spent the years that followed studying the tag data and movement patterns informally began calling her the deep blue candidate, a nod to Deep Blue, the largest great white shark ever reliably captured on film E, a female estimated at 20 feet in length, photographed off the coast of Mexico in 2013. Whether the shark behind the 2003 predation event and the creature later caught on camera as Deep Blue are one and the same animal, no one can say with any certainty. The ocean does not hand over its residents for easy identification. But that ambiguity is actually the most important piece of this whole story, because we tend to approach the ocean as something we already understand. We have mapped it, we have named it, we have carved it up into zones and biomes and ecological categories. We have assigned everything living in it a Latin name and a slot on a chart. And we look at that chart and we feel confident we know what is out there beneath the surface. We do not. The ocean holds animals, behaviors, and ways of living that we have never once observed. Ecological relationships that have never been recorded or documented. The 2003 vanishing of that tagged great white shark stands as a reminder that the largest wilderness on this planet remains, in the deepest possible sense, completely unknown. That data recorder came rolling ashore like a message sealed inside a bottle, a note sent up from the deep. Something lives down here that you had no idea about. Something larger than anything you imagined. Something that treats your apex predators as a midday meal and descends to 2,000 feet to do it. The great white shark spent 11 million years becoming the most terrifying predator the ocean has ever produced. And somewhere out in those frigid, lightless waters off the Australian coast, something glanced at it and saw dinner. The ocean is not the place we have always imagined it to be. The food chain does not stop where we decided to draw the line. And the next data recorder that tumbles onto a beach might carry information even more difficult to process than this one did. Whatever is living down there is not sitting around waiting for us to find it. It is simply going about its existence in the cold and the dark, doing exactly what it has always done, long before any of us were paying attention, and long after we stop. That is the real truth behind what consumed the great white shark. And honestly, I believe this is only the very beginning.